Welcome to the Embodied Aquarian Age podcast. This is your host, Emily Trinkus. I was on hiatus from podcast interviews for the past few months, but I was inspired to jump back in when I saw that Sol Luckman had written a new book, Get Out of Here Alive, Inner Alchemy and Immortality. Sol is an award-winning author of both fiction and nonfiction, and is also a painter and lyricist. He and his partner Lee pioneered the Regenetics method, which works with DNA as a multidimensional interface to facilitate healing and awakening. Sol and I talked all about that in our first podcast conversation back in 2022. And even before knowing anything about his new book, I felt really drawn in and just an immediate yes to reading it. And I'm so grateful that I followed that impulse. The book has had a significant impact on me, not only in terms of how I think about and understand or understand this weird world we're living in, but has also prompted me to make some changes in my own life and in how I'm using my energy and focusing my attention. Get Out of Here Alive will be released in March, but Sol is offering advanced copies that can be downloaded from his site, solluckman.substack.com. I'm excited to share this conversation with you, and I hope you find it as inspiring and mind expanding as I did. Hi, Sol. Welcome back to the Embodied Aquarian Age podcast.
Thank you, Emily, for having me. We were just talking before coming on here, and we realized that it had been 3 years since we last chatted. It seems almost impossible.
It really does, because I was thinking it was maybe 2 years. And then I went back and looked, and no, it was April of 2022. And at that point, we talked about your Regenetics method. We talked about healing and DNA and the language of the birds. And I will put a link to that first interview because I thought it was pretty fantastic. And now we're here to talk about your latest book, Get Out of Here Alive, Inner Alchemy and Immortality. And as I was telling you, I loved this book, and it came at such a perfect time for me. Maybe partly because we're at the start of a new calendar year and thinking about our intention. Well, I'm thinking about my intentions for the new year and reflecting on the past and what I want to shift. And I just found so much of the book really helpful in getting myself back on track, on a track that I want to be on. So just to get into it, it seems like let's say a foundational premise of the book is that changing the world is an inside job. And as long as we're focused out there, we're losing our power. We're not going to be effective. We're not going to be powerful creators. So maybe we can start with, how did you come to this inner standing, as you would say? And I know you mentioned in the book that at one point in your younger years, you were more of an activist in the way that we think about activists and focused on what's going on out there. So what led you away from trying to fix things out there?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and it's a little bit complicated, as you might imagine. I appreciate your feedback on the book. I'm glad it came at the right time for you. In terms of the question that you posed, I guess it came in stages, really. This dawning awareness that the methodology of going outward, of trying to fix things out in the world before you fix yourself, it just never seemed to work. And, I just began cataloging in my mind the abject failures of all of the different movements and revolutions uh, and isms and that kind of thing. And it just seemed like, after a while, it just seemed like, if you can't see this, the joke's really on you, speaking to myself. And I began thinking about what might be going on more seriously, and reflecting on things like heal yourself and heal the world. What does that really even mean? What is unity consciousness? People talk about that. I've written about that, but what is it? and what might it mean in reference to this discussion, and what might be going on in the world that seems in a world that seems so very wrong from a certain perspective. I'm not saying it's categorically wrong. If you read between the lines, not even between the lines, but if you go far enough in the book, you realize that even though I'm describing a challenging situation, it's not all doom and gloom. And it's kind of here for a reason if we're willing to embrace that reason and to take on the challenge of our own hero's journey. That's the really big deal here is that we're the hero of our own drama, and we have to go in on that journey. I created a little meme today. It was a picture of this kind of dragon-like being, the dragon being a major theme in my book, and the a little with a little person standing underneath it, looking up into its huge red face or red eye. And the caption is, "The only way to defeat the dragon on your own hero's journey is to journey inward to get out of here alive." So
Mm.
that's obviously the subject matter of the book, and we could talk about the different aspects of, why it is the case that one must go inward and what's happening on the outward to make it an impossible situation.
Right. Well, I think this comes down to the nature of reality, which of course is a big subject, but we have to know where we are and how this reality works to know how to find our power within it. And so this idea, and maybe we can get into, your current understanding of where we are and how this place works. And you write about how, in a very maybe real sense, there's no out there. We are in a dream. We to attach to anything externally as an objective reality is false. It's not true. So and you quote, I love the quotes that you bring in from many sources, but especially Neville Goddard. And you say, and this is quoting Neville Goddard, "In a world that is nothing more or less than our consciousness objectified." I feel like a lot of what you do in this book is to take very seriously what we've learned from, say, quantum physics, or what current science, to whatever extent that's useful, is telling us about the nature of reality, but really like taking that to its logical conclusion.
Right. People bring this up sometimes, and I say, yeah, I go all the way. I'm not doing even quantum versions of science, which I call Newtonianism light. Because really they still want that particle, they still want that thing that you can get to. And at the end of the day, at the end of um, this path, there is no there, as Gertrude Stein is credited as saying.
Right. And so then what does that mean in terms of how well, what does that mean in terms of who we are and how do we navigate this realm? And what you say about going all the way, it's like and I know you talk a lot about truthers and take truthers to task in this book, which I also really appreciate. But for a lot of us, we've gotten to this point where we see, okay, there is, in one sense, there's the reality that we are on a farm. We are being farmed for our loosh, for our emotional energy. There are inorganic entities feeding on this energy. And then I think a lot of people in the truth community stop there and we're screwed. And and this is a slave system, or we're stuck in this prison, the end.
Yeah, that's right. That's the black pill
Yes.
phenomenon we're seeing now. We went from the blue pill to the red pill to the black pill, and I said in another meme that we're trying to get to the white pill of transcendence, really.
Mm,
Um, and it just seems like this is a necessary developmental stage. It's almost like Kubler-Ross's stages of grief, but it's the stages of awakening. And we go from not being awake to being kind of wide awake and really wide-eyed about everything and kind of naive and stupid to being just depressed and feeling like we're trapped and everything is hopeless and we're damned to accepting the lay, playing as it lays, as Joan Didion said, and figuring out how to work within the system to transcend it, to go beyond it. And that's what obviously my book is all about, getting out of here alive. And there again, I'm going all the way. I'm really meaning that literally. I define what I mean by alive, but I do mean get out of here, and I do mean with your consciousness intact. So it's a big subject, and I really get that. It's a big subject for a short book, and that may be a criticism that some people bring to bear on it, but I'm okay with that. It was more like an introduction to a concept that maybe a lot of people haven't thought about, and some people have had inklings and intimations about this type of thing, but they have never put it into words. So I'm beginning to get a lot of feedback from people that it's helping them put their mental house in order around these kinds of concepts, and suddenly it doesn't seem so far-fetched, and it seems, if not easy, it seems at least theoretically achievable.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, I appreciate how much ground you covered in a relatively short book, and also that it is very accessible and funny and very well written. So it's a fun read and also a mind-blowing read, and also, as I said, like super practical and grounded. So I'm very impressed by how much territory you covered, and that you were able to break down some pretty complex concepts into into bites that I could take in here. So, coming back to this idea of going all the way, so you talk about this concept of oneness. And I think, again, a lot of us are on board with that idea that there is only one of us here. And in this realm of consciousness, and ultimately it's all one consciousness, and we're different expressions of this one consciousness. And if that's true, then this inorganic entity you describe as the dragon, and we know there are many names for this force that is feeding on human energy, human emotions, feeding on the loosh. But if there is only one of us here, then some part of us actually created the dragon too, or dreamed that into existence, as I think you put it. So talk about that. What does this mean if the dragon is part of us, if we dreamed the dragon into existence?
Yeah, that's a really loaded topic for a lot of people. But if you want to just simplify it, you can think about the mythology surrounding the Garden of Eden. And here's a situation where a serpent or a dragon showed up, right? And he gave a gift of knowledge, as it were, in exchange for a kind of sacrifice. And that's kind of the basic storyline there. And the way I understand that, and there are other people who have written about the same subject that I reference in the book, so it's not just me thinking about this, but as I understand it, basically there was a period of time when humanity existed in an unconscious state. And by that, I don't mean that we were zombies. I mean that our consciousness was bathed in the what I call the waters of the dark sea. That's a shamanic term. It was bathed in the realm of the unconscious, and it really only operated in that realm. That's the dream time. The reason that's remembered is because it was real, and it was a kind of incalculable period of time during which humanity lived in a very unified fashion, unified with each other, unified with the earth, unified with all that is, and yet we did not have what we think of today as a conscious mind. Very bizarre to even think about at this point in time. So in this narrative, some part of humanity desired more, desired a consciousness, a conscious mind to go with the unconscious. And that's what actually brought the dragon into the garden of the dream time. It was our desire to go beyond where we were. It was an evolutionary desire, if you want to look at it that way. And I use that in a very broad sense. So we brought in this inorganic force that was capable of giving us its operating system, its mind, for us to use as our consciousness.
Mm,
And the sacrifice was is that we fell under its power and we became farm animals on its energy farm, which is the world.
hmm hmm
Now, the people, that's where a lot of truthers go, well, then, yeah, we're screwed. What can you do about that? That's really, really crazy. So as I mentioned in the book, there are strategies to take back your power from the dragon. You can even do it to such an extent that it will completely leave you alone, which is not always actually fun, according to reports of people who have done it. It can leave you feeling absolutely alone for a while and like, what's the purpose? I didn't like the dragon, but at least I wasn't so utterly alone, you know.
mm,
So that's kind of a strange thing. But there's another factor that in that fall from grace where we fell out of the dream time and we adopted a foreign consciousness, we also got a third part of ourselves that just appeared. It was almost like an accident, or maybe an accident on purpose. Maybe the dreamtime unconsciousness that was so powerful in us saw this coming all along, and that's really what it wanted. And what we're really talking about is the birth of a third part of ourselves that John Kreider calls the ghost in the machine. I also refer to it as in the alchemical vein as the alchemical child. It may also be the luminous child of Gnosticism. There exists this luminous child that's going to come into the world and undo this whole simulation and all that kind of thing. And the ghost in the machine, or this luminous child, the alchemical child, is that magical part of ourselves. We wonder how we can do things like remote view and heal people at a distance and travel and do amazing things in our dreams and have these imaginative flights of fantasy that change reality as we know it through downloads of incredible technology. It's all the luminous child. It's all the ghost in the machine that is mostly half asleep because we've been using, or mostly all the way asleep because we've been using this foreign operating system as our consciousness that does everything it can to kind of keep the lid on the luminous child.
mm,
It's not like the luminous child is coming in that Gnostic way, like it's going to appear. It's here, it's in everybody. It's just waking it up and learning how to work with it. And that's really what the evolution of the material I present and Get Out of Here Alive is. And I've picked up that baton in this work that I'll be introducing within days called PragmAlchemy. And it is an alchemical form of self-body work where you learn over a period of time and steps to actually awaken and conflate with the alchemical child.
mm. Ooh, exciting. Well, and yeah, let's talk about this magical part of ourselves because I really like in the book how you say there are no muggles here. Like this is within all of us because I think there's such a conditioning around the special people, the people who the magicians, the wizards, the people who can do magic, also the people who are creative. Oh, I'm not creative, they're creative, right? And this ongoing projection of power that only certain people have, only special people have, versus really getting that we all have this potential within ourselves. And you give us a lot of keys for how to start unlocking this magician part of us. And so I'd love to just talk about a few. I mean, the book takes us through different practices, different just really practical ways of being to help unlock our magic. And it seems like the book goes from more simple to more complex practices, which are also really interesting. But just like where to start with unlocking our magic?
Yeah, that is really the question in terms of where most people are coming from, I feel like. And I will start where I started in the book, and it is recognizing that we are in an environment that is designed to extract our energy. By which I mean, really, to extract our the power of our attention. It's a way of hijacking our imagination to create what the dragon wants, not what we want. So we have to understand that we're basically batteries, a la, the Matrix, that's feeding batteries that are powering up a system that is foreign to us and does not have our best interests in mind.
Yeah.
So the first thing we have to begin doing is extracting ourselves from the system at those pain points where we give up our energy. And this can involve technology, it can involve cell phones, it can involve political arguments um, or different types of conflicts. It can also involve truthing and going down rabbit hole after rabbit hole to try to nail down something factual in an observer generated construct. There's nothing more absurd than that. It's an observer generated construct. There is nothing ultimately factual. There is nothing ultimately real.
This was a big aha for me as you wrote about truthers and the trouble with truthing. And again, if we're taking seriously this idea that our imagination is God, basically, and so we're playing God as we use our imagination, as we focus our attention. So as I'm on Telegram scrolling through my truther community and all of these doomsday scenarios, I'm actually helping to bring that into existence.
Absolutely. Your
Oh,
attention is harvested to create those outcomes potentially. So when you scroll through it, when you watch that video, when you subscribe, and God forbid, when you like give money and that kind of thing, you are helping to create the apocalypse.
that that struck me as truth. And again, I there were some very helpful consequences for me in reading this book where I did unsubscribe from some email lists that I'm on and from some channels that I'm on. I'm not on any social media, but I am on Telegram, and that I see how that's not productive for my attention to go in that direction.
One thing, Emily, I would like to say, because people kind of have a knee-jerk reaction and they will run these scripts when you say there's nothing factual or nothing real, and they'll be like, well, what about, or what if I walked up and smacked you upside the head? Is that real? Well, that it's not that simplistic. If we live in a kind of ever expanding dream, realize that just like in your own dreams, there are parts of this dreamscape that go faster than others.
Mm.
In a lot of your dreams, you can change the dream scenario very quickly. And that's because it's operating at a different speed. This is just a dream too. It's just at a much lower speed. It's harder to change and it looks more real. That doesn't mean it is real. And I invite you to consider all of the scientists who have been drilling down, into the atomic and subatomic and, into the quantum realm, and they can never find anything ultimately that isn't divisible into something else. Reality, that factual thing, is forever escaping us
Yeah.
as we try to pin it down. And you can apply exactly the same awareness to truther memes or conspiracy theories where people are always trying to get to the bottom of what happened when what happened is a product of people's attention on what they think happened. This is the whole action of mimetic belief. We believe what ultimately we end up believing what others believe if we like them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's really, really weird. And so you get these charismatic truthers out there bringing all these people, buying into them with mimetic belief, and then having their attention focused, I would say, on behalf of the dragon, knowingly or otherwise, and usually for money also. And that attention is then focused to create all of this chaos that we see in the world. The world is not inherently chaotic, but we make it that way.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. You're right. Attention is what refines the raw resources the raw resource of our concepts and feelings into rocket fuel. And just really, I mean, as part of our initial, activation of our magical inner wizard and withdrawal from contributing to the dragon and this dystopian future, just having awareness of how powerful our attention is and how powerful it is to focus on what we actually desire, which again, there's not much of that in the there's no more of that in the truther realm than there is in people who are watching CNN.
Well, the weird thing is that so many people are they're creating scenarios, but they're creating the opposite of what they would say that they want.
Right.
They're leading, they're doing very strange things while really not believing in the power of attention. It's a strange thing. I mean, we're constantly disempowered in this construct by lies and half truths. So this idea that, really it's all material or your attention isn't that powerful, you're just one little drop in a gigantic ocean. These are the types of lines and scripts that we get run through us, because we're really not even thinking with our own thoughts. We're thinking with the dragon's mind. The dragon is literally in our heads and until it's not, and that's a whole other discussion. So I ask people who are maybe having a bit of a hard time understanding this attention phenomenon, just to consider a very commonplace uh, event in a lot of people's lives that happens maybe multiple times or even over and over. And there's a couple I would bring up. One is you're thinking about somebody and the phone rings.
Yeah.
Another one is you're having you're thinking about a situation that might involve numerics, numbers, you look at the clock and it's exactly in alignment with whatever you're thinking about.
Right.
This kind of thing happens all the time if you really stop to observe all of these weird little serendipities. What I see these as is really it's the luminous child winking at you. It's like
Yeah.
wake me up a little more, get to know me better, and let's wake up together. Let's learn how to combine the conscious mind with the unconscious mind, and then we'll do miracles. You think
Right.
this is cool? I mean, this is nothing.
Right. And I think this is, part of why I love this book so much too is because it's such a great reflection of the higher potential of the astrology that we're in right now, which I think is a lot about waking up to who we actually are as humans and the power, what we are capable of creating when we're when our consciousness is liberated, basically. And so this is such a useful guidebook in terms of that liberation. So, first step, we recognize that we're in this environment where the power of our attention is constantly being extracted. And then we take steps to take back our attention and just be very conscious of how we're focusing or what we're focusing on. Yeah.
Right, right. A helpful way of looking at this is to use a couple of shamanic concepts. I mean, or at least a shamanic concept, and then we'll play off of that. So one shamanic concept that comes out of the work of Carlos Castaneda is the idea of not doing. And you see, obviously, there are tons of of similarities between that and a lot of Eastern concepts, but like Wu Wei, for example. But in not doing, you purposely choose to act in a way that is different from how you've been acting. And what it does is it helps shake you out of that rut, that routine. It's a pattern break. And so
Mm.
you can do all kinds of pattern breaks. You can also just stop doing things that you've been doing and go on things like a truth or detox or get off social media for a day or see how it feels. I mean, I joke about, getting the delirium tremens, just going off of social media for a week. But people are so incredibly addicted. I mean, social media addiction is it's rampant and it's insidious. But in any case, there's all of these things that you can do that don't involve learning anything. And if anything, they involve unlearning. As you begin to do this, you stop being loosed as much. You stop having that power drawn from you. I basically define loosh as consciousness on its way to becoming unconscious, where
Mm.
it's being taken from you and then used for someone else's purposes. As you gain more energy, then you're able to step into other more active types of doings as opposed to not doings. And that's what I get into in the second half of the book when I talk about recapitulation, when I talk about inner alchemy and energy absorption and reabsorption, and when I talk about Regenetics. You can actually engage the cultivation of your energy much more actively. And that's at the heart of this PragmAlchemy concept that I mentioned earlier as well. It's really a technique for very rapidly building up your personal energy. And this has a lot of potential benefits. It can have health benefits. It can also have relationship and interpersonal benefits where it helps you set boundaries and see things more clearly. It can provide lots of inspiration and creativity and power up creative projects and that kind of thing. Really, this is the beginning of an extremely long list. Ultimately, this energy is what you can compact within your body so much of this energy, so compacted at the core of your body that it turns into what has been called the Philosopher's Stone. And that is your bionuclear reactor powerhouse that empowers you to actually fly beyond the confines of this world and get out of here alive.
Yeah, and again, we have this distorted idea of alchemy as literally turning lead into gold as an out there process versus the inner alchemy, which is the real work and where the real power is, it seems like. And this was something that was a really new concept to me when you were talking about that practice of re reclaiming, well, yeah, reclaiming power. But okay, I think about loosh and ways that we can stop, offering our energy. But then you talk about actually eating the loosh, taking the loosh in ourselves versus having it go to the dragon and then using it ourselves to build up our own power, which was just pretty mind-blowing for me. Just like a radical turnaround, like, oh, we could take it to this whole new level of what we're doing with this.
Right. I mean, you have to think when you're loosed, okay, when this energy is taken from you, where is it going? Well, I I theorized in my last book, The World Cult and You, that it kind of made its way up a food chain. This energy is kind of passed along. So if you're watching a truther channel, then that truther gets some of your loosh, and then they're tithing that up the line, maybe to their handlers, and then maybe that's going up to people way behind the scenes, and then maybe ultimately at that point it makes it all the way to the dragon.
Right.
And so I give a step-by-step concept for how that works. So what you can do with this energy when it's extracted from you is you can pull it back in. So when you have your own energy flare, you can reabsorb your own energy. So you can even stop in the middle of something and do that if you need to, or you can do it a little bit later and pull it back in before it's totally gone. You can also go in even a good bit later and bring it back by projecting back to that moment in your mind. It's just basically using your imagination to time travel, and then you pull in the energy from that situation. And basically, that's also how you heal trauma, is you pull it in like that and you stop that bleeding, which you perceive as from a past event and you think it's over, but really there is no time. So it's still you're still bleeding and you're bleeding to death from 1,000 little traumatic paper cuts. So part of what one does on the path of inner alchemy and shamanism is you go in and you heal all those paper cuts.
Mm.
And in so doing, you pull back in the energy that was lost through that process, and that tremendously builds up your energy. Also, as you do this, you are depriving the dragon of its food. So eventually, you can personally build up enough power so that it starts to leave you alone because it realizes you're not a you're not a meal for it anymore. That's a big deal. And if you think about changing the external reality, I invite you to consider 1,000 or 1,000,000 inner alchemists doing what I'm describing at any given time and basically depriving the dragon of its food supply and how it would absolutely weaken that controlling force in the world.
Right.
And as in support of this notion, I invite you to consider some of the meditation experiments that have been done where you have a large group of meditators meditating together in a certain place, and they look at various indices in the surrounding area, crime, accidents, fatalities, that kind of thing, and everything just plummets. So you start with a state of chaos, you meditate with a large group of people, and the whole area, and sometimes it's a very large area, basically begins to come into order. Think about that times 1,000,000, because what I'm describing is vastly more powerful than meditation.
Mm. Hmm. Yeah. And this is really where each of us has the same amount of power to be a quote hero. It's like that again, there's this conditioning around looking for the one Neo, who's
Right.
going to save us, or waiting for Jesus or waiting for the aliens or something. But in the process you're describing, it's like every human has that same capacity to work with energy and reclaim our own energy. And it seems like one of the keys there is really making a choice to see where we are, to conceptualize where we are as a dojo, as a training ground versus the prison planet. Like it requires that mind shift to come out of I'm a victim of this cruel, harsh, loosh sucking world to I can be the hero of my own journey. I can be the spiritual warrior. And it seems like it does take a lot of strength and courage. And even what you were saying about being, that experience of being utterly alone when you disconnect from the dragon, but there's also the aloneness of, okay, I'm no longer trauma bonding with my fellow truthers, and I stopped belonging to the, mainstream Normieville. So I'm already an outcast there. So it's like this willingness to really go it alone in some sense in order to open up to the bigger belonging or the bigger connection.
That's true. It's absolutely true. That's what happens. And I think that's one of the reasons people shy away from this path because they're terrified of that isolation and that loneliness. And I understand that. I get it. It doesn't have to be that way, and it doesn't have to always be that way. People need to realize that what you're really learning to do on this path is to project into other dimensions of awareness, and you can essentially begin to lucid dream on demand.
Mm,
And when you do that, you can go and have unbelievable experiences that are as real as this so-called reality, or as illusory if you want to look at it that way. Meaning you could go have a complete life, a complete relationship in another world with another being if you wanted to. Time would function very differently, but you can imagine a scenario where you go and have a life and then you come back to this world to maybe your partner or somebody and you know they may or may not understand what you've been through. It's there's an amazing movie from back in the day starring Christopher Reeve called Somewhere in Time. And it's I won't give away the plot, but it involves essentially time travel and this man going into a projection, much like what I'm describing, having a relationship in the past before returning to the present. And he
Mm.
has to kind of live with the legacy of that experience. And so there's just so much to it because really so many things can happen. I mean, I believe in these lucid dream realms. It's, we've talked about just taking back your power, but it's also, we're talking about the greater Akashic here. I mean, the interdimensional Akashic here, where you could, in theory, go into these realms in search of uh, healing information, a book or a protocol or a way of working with energy where you could actually bring something back with you that could change the world.
Mm. Yeah, so it's like the willingness to be utterly alone in this realm, and again, not that that's a forever thing, but the willingness to stand alone in doing this work in order to open up to infinite realms. There's so much more. Well, and you maybe it's quoting John Crider is saying the higher purpose of the Matrix is to transcend it, and it's pretty exciting to feel into and imagine what is beyond the Matrix and where else could we go if we were doing that inner work that allows us to open up to these other dimensions.
It is exciting. And I also wanted to point out that it's possible to do this in tandem with somebody else or even multiple people. I'm not saying this is common or it's necessarily easy, but people can actually lucid dream together.
Mm,
And these types of journeys can be undertaken as a couple or as a family or as a group. It's the sky's really the limit when you get into the shaman's party in Castaneda, and that's what they were doing. They were basically traveling together into the realm of the unconscious.
wow. Okay. Yeah. That's cool. Different kind of bonding and shared aspiration. And I would imagine just, as when people come together and with a shared intention, and it can be so much easier to move through the obstacles and expand in new directions as, I think it's just kind of how humans work. If we're, you know, working toward a shared vision, there's a lot of power there.
Well, I'm always really concerned about that type of thing going in the direction of a cult.
Gotcha.
And in the world cult and I really examine how the whole world structure, this matrix, the dragon's world, is just made up of cults everywhere. And we're born into them. We don't even know. They're like the air we breathe. The cults are just all around us. I consider our families and most of our relationships to be cults. And the purpose of these cults is to control us and to extract our energy. So, whatever you do, you have to be very aware that you don't fall under the dragon spell of some emissary of the dragon who's, there to just basically re-entrap and re-loose you.
Mm, hmm. It gets tricky. It gets tricky. And I think also because we generally don't have a lot of training or awareness of the subtle realms of the energetic realms. So it can, we can get kind of uh starry-eyed and oh wow and be pulled into, like you said, like another cult, or it's just a different way of extracting our power. So yeah, I mean, I think that's a big learning edge for a lot of us. How do we actually navigate the invisible realms, the subtle realms?
Yes, and there are many techniques to make that safer and more efficient. The the truth of the matter is, however, when you're starting out doing this and you're building up your power and you're learning to project your consciousness, you're in much more of a controlled environment. It's a little bit like the construct in the Matrix, or something like that, where it's basically just a room in your mind, or I call it a mental chamber, and you train your awareness and your attention in that space to do certain tasks. And it's very safe because it's very close to your everyday reality. So while it's, theoretically possible as you journey further down this path that you might be out there and or in there as it were and encounter an inorganic being or something that thinks you're very interesting and not in a good way, um, then you have to learn how to deal with those scenarios. So I won't say that's not the case. So full disclosure around that. But for a very long time, and I mean maybe even years, you can simply just build up your power and learn to galvanize and sharpen your attention.
Right. Right. And I want to come back to the earlier part of the book and some of the just very like getting the basics in order as almost like prerequisites for doing this deeper level of alchemical work. And you mentioned that spaciousness or just not being so busy. And I think this is so key because it's very counterculture not to be busy, 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 not to have a packed schedule, not to be working so hard. And there's so much value in, like you said, in the not doing. Yeah, can you talk more about that? Why we need that spaciousness and downtime and dream time?
Right. So when you're going and going and going all the time and you're focused on the external and on external objectives most of the time, you're playing in the dragon's space
Mm.
and you're always being controlled, manipulated, loosed to a certain degree when you're in that space until you've developed enough power that you can be in it, but not be of it. That's sort of that moment in the Matrix when Neo, comes of age and he can be there and it can't harm him, at that point in time, at least in the first movie. So the idea here is that it's actually necessary to give yourself time to go inward and to spend time doing the work by going inward and using the various techniques that I describe and that other people have brought forward. I'm not saying I have the only way of doing this. My research suggests that there's quite a few ways of doing this type of thing. But this is the shamanic, inner alchemical, sort of kind of solo path for doing it. And to make that work, you really have to commit to spending time in simplicity and in silence and getting to know your silence, going inside and getting to know your alchemical child. When you go into the first mental chamber, I mean, one of the things you're doing is you're seeing yourself in a room of some kind, in a space, and you first you kind of create you stare at this wall. It's kind of like staring at the back of your eyelids, and then you kind of push it away from you, and you create a kind of 3D environment. But then you can actually see yourself from behind, or you can watch yourself walking around as you learn to move in that space. And the obvious question is what is seeing you, or who are you, where are you in all of this? And you actually eventually realize, oh my God, I am the ghost, I am the luminous child, that's me right there.
Mm.
And you're realizing that from the position of the person lying on your bed projecting into your mental chamber. So you're the same. It's really, there's an amazing symbol in alchemy. It's the Ouroboros, the snake that bites its tail. Here we are in the year of the snake. We're, you know, going in that direction. And the symbol for PragmAlchemy is the Ouroboros. And in fact, I created this wooden block that is a tool for doing the PragmAlchemy myofascial decompression. And I just called it the Ouroboros because, it just made sense. It is your touchstone and it's what allows you to go inward. Physically in this case. So that's another thing you can do is you can actually go inward and get more in touch with your body And that's a way of creating much more space to store the energy that you begin automatically accumulating by not putting yourself in situations where you're loosed,
Mm.
and that you consciously accumulate by doing certain activities.
Mm. And you also talk about the importance of simplicity and silence and that spaciousness, non-busyness for creativity. And something that just really impresses me about how you're living your life is that your creative output is incredible. As a writer, a painter, you also make music. And so would you say that simplicity, having a simple life, having spaciousness, having a lot of downtime and dream time, has that been really key for yourself when it comes to being such a prolific creator?
100%, absolutely. I have designed my life that so that I'm not really in the public eye. I don't put my image out there. That's on purpose. I have a whole chapter in the book on why I do that. And I have privacy, I have solitude, I have time to devote to my creative pursuits. And I got really lucky. I got a partner, Lee, who my life partner, who is not the kind of creator that I am, but she's a different type of creator, and we just are kind of like yin and yang. We just go together. So she complements me beautifully and empowers me to be the person creating, the books and the materials and that kind of thing. And then she really helps create structure for it and provide all kinds of different supports to make it even possible. So that was luck. Maybe I did something in some past lives to deserve it. I don't know, but just chalk it up to luck. But the other part is I consciously created a lifestyle where I could pull away and, be kind of like my own Thoreau. I mean, I'm sort of like Thoreau living at Walden. I'm doing my own thing. I mean, he got to where he could work one day a week in the world to make enough money to live on, and then the rest of the time he walked in the woods and thought and wrote. And as I've said, I think I mentioned this in the book, the world's a better place for it. I mean, he inspired Gandhi, he inspired civil disobedience. So he was able to get to that level of lucidity by giving himself time and space.
Yeah. Which is again so radical. And also just hearing you talk about that, there's a part of me that tunes into this anxiety or starts feeling anxiety, even though I have a pretty spacious life myself. But I can imagine that people who are very caught up in the hamster wheel of busyness, there can be fear of slowing down and taking a pause and being alone with themselves. Oh, and then crazy mind sets in, or what am I going to do with myself? Or what if I can't create? Or, like there, I think that's very edgy to take that spaciousness, or can be for some people.
Yeah, I think so. I really do. It's I don't know that there's much to be said about that other than, ganbate, the Japanese phrase where you just have to go for it.
Right. Right. And,
What else are
and
you gonna do? What else are you going to do with your life? I mean, yeah, you can be in denial of who you are and what your potential is, or you could just live and die not knowing what you could have done. To me, that's really just if that's tragic, really.
yeah.
I mean, and certainly it's not a gift to yourself, and it's really depriving the world potentially of a great gift.
Right. Yeah, and as we know, nobody on their deathbed says they wish they had worked longer hours or made more money, right? Like that's not really what we're here for, and we know that. And to find who we really are and what is that unique gift that I have and that I came in with, that does require space and time and that courage to be alone and see what happens. Um, so in our final few minutes together, I want to come back to the title of the book, Get Out of Here Alive, Inner Alchemy and Immortality. And you say right in the preface that you're exploring the radical possibility that death doesn't have to be the end of life's journey. So again, here you are taking it all the way. So what do you mean by immortality here, or getting out of here alive?
Yeah, I'm going to waffle around that because I feel like that's a bit of a spoiler, and I would rather simply say that I don't I don't necessarily mean that one doesn't go through a massive transition to get out of here alive. I mean that the consciousness is intact
Mm,
and that you can travel forward with it. So I'll leave it at that, in terms of responding to your question and let people maybe come and sample the book, which you can do for free. And I would really encourage people to do just that. If I could just speak to that, Emily, what my goal right now is to have as many people as possible just download and read the book and then leave a review when it's published on March 20th. So leave an Amazon review. That would be preferable, but there's Goodreads and BookBub and many other places where you could leave your review. This will help the book get into the algorithm, especially on Amazon, and make it so that it could become a bestseller and it could attract a lot of attention and potentially help a lot of people open up to this way of looking at things. I my goal really isn't to make money. I don't really need to make a lot of money. I'm just not at that point in my life, but I would love to see this reach people to a much greater degree than any of my other books have been able to do as I've, kind of published them, self-published them, sort of, choosing a life of, being in my own little world a little bit. So this is sort of my coming out of the creative closet and just really putting it out there and asking for help in making the book successful. I could really use your help, and really, I don't want your money. I want you to download it and just leave an honest review.
great. Yeah, and I would be thrilled if this book reached a ton of people and set off a wave of inner alchemy and people reclaiming their power. So I will have the links in my show notes, of course, but tell people if they're listening somewhere else how they can find you and your work and how they can download this book.
Yeah, I'm at solluckman.substack.com, and you can subscribe to my channel. And Emily's over on Substack as well. So if you're listening to this and you're not subscribed to Emily Trinkhouse, please do so. It's the Embodied Aquarian Age, right?
That's correct.
So
Yes.
yeah, that's a really good podcast. So please support Emily and get yourself a Substack account and come over and start creating. It's pretty cool. And if you show up there, there's lots of different ways that you could find this book. But there in the tab it says longevity, and if you click on that, then that's the easiest way to get to the link to go download the book. But there's lots of different articles you'll see having to do with either PragmAlchemy or with Get Out of Here Alive, and just click on one of those and you'll find a link. You'll be able to go download the book and review it. Also, the PragmAlchemy is kicking off in the next few days, and that's going to be very interesting. So you'll be able to learn more about that and experience the first three exercises in this jump starter campaign that we're doing on Substack. You can also see what the Ouroboros looks like. You can order the Ouroboros. There's some other very interesting pieces to this puzzle. So please come and check out the Jump Starter campaign. It's really cool because it's the kind of practical outward extension, if you will, of this inward book. And I would love for people to experience it and provide some feedback. I would love to see what this does for you.
Awesome. Thank you. And Saul, I want to give a big shout out to your Regenetics work. And again, we talked all about that in the previous podcast, but I think you're doing a monthly free Regenetics. Can't remember what it's called exactly. Is that correct?
Worldwide potentiation ceremony. If you go to phoenixregenetics.org, you'll be able to sign up for free to get your your inner genetic activation on a monthly basis. I think we're taking February off, but we'll be doing it on the first Sunday of March, and just sign up and experience that. And it's very powerful. I also address certain aspects of Regenetics in Get Out of Here Alive. So there is a crossover and a very important crossover that we don't have time to get into at this point in time. But I think you'll be very intrigued by how all of this alchemical and shamanic work relates to Regenetics.
Yeah, and I second that it's an incredibly powerful process. I went through the first potentiation and then two more levels of the Regenetics experience, and wow, yeah, highly recommend. So, Saul, any last thoughts you want to leave us with?
Well, I just really appreciate you having me back on. You're such a wonderful interviewer, and I appreciate your reading the book and having such thoughtful questions and feedback and insights. It's just been a pleasure to spend a little time with you again.
Well, great. Thank you so much. And yeah, love the book. Excited for more people to read it, for this great wisdom to get out there. And I'm also excited for your PragmAlchemy and looking forward to that. So thank you for your amazing work, Saul. And yeah, just wishing you great success with getting this out there.
Well, I appreciate it, and let's not be strangers on Substack. I know that we're both very busy with our, with what we do there, but I'm always happy to see in my inbox that you've got something new going on.
And vice versa. All right. Take care, Saul.
You too.